In the rolling hills of what is now KwaZulu-Natal, a story began that would reshape the destiny of southern Africa. It starts not with a king, but with a boy born under a cloud of controversy. His name was Shaka. His father was Mfecane, a chief of the then small Zulu clan. His mother was Nandi, a woman of the Alangeni people. Their union was unsanctioned, a brief affair that resulted in a child considered illegitimate by many. The name Shaka itself is said to derive from a word for an intestinal beetle, a dismissive term used to deny Nandi's pregnancy. This was the welcome he received into the world. From the very beginning, Shaka's life was one of struggle. He and his mother, Nandi, were outcasts. In his father's kraal, he wasn't treated as a prince, but as a source of shame. The other children, spurred on by the whispers of their parents, tormented him relentlessly. He was the boy with no proper place, the son of a forbidden liaison. This constant bullying and humiliation didn't break him, it forged him. It lit a fire within him, a burning desire to prove everyone wrong, to become something far greater than the lowly status they had assigned him. Nandi, a fierce and protective mother, shielded him as best she could, instilling in him a resilience that would define his life, but the stigma was too great. Eventually, the pressure became unbearable. Nandi and a young Shaka were forced into exile, cast out from the Zulu clan. They became wanderers, moving from one community to another, searching for refuge. This period of hardship was also a period of learning. Shaka observed the dynamics of different clans, the strengths and weaknesses of their leaders, and the way they conducted warfare. He saw firsthand how disunity and petty rivalries could cripple a people. These years on the move, living on the fringes of society, were his first, brutal classroom in politics and survival. He was no longer just an outcast boy, he was a keen observer, absorbing every lesson the harsh world had to offer. Their journey eventually led them to the powerful Mfecane paramountcy, ruled by the shrewd and ambitious chief, Dingiswayo. Here, for the first time, Shaka found a place where his strength and spirit were not just accepted, but valued. He was now a young man, tall and powerfully built, his body hardened by years of deprivation. He enlisted in one of Dingiswayo's military regiments, or Amabutho. This was the turning point. Under Dingiswayo's command, Shaka wasn't just another spear carrier, he was a prodigy. The Mfecane military was already undergoing reforms, moving away from ritualistic, skirmishing warfare towards more disciplined, organized tactics. Shaka thrived in this environment. He quickly distinguished himself not just with his physical prowess and immense courage in battle, but with his revolutionary mind. He questioned everything. Why throw spears from a distance when you could close with the enemy? He developed a new weapon, the iklwa, a short, broad-bladed stabbing spear, named for the sound it made as it was withdrawn from a body. It was a weapon for close-quarters combat, demanding unparalleled bravery. He also advocated for dispensing with cumbersome sandals to increase speed and feel for the terrain, toughening his soldiers' feet through rigorous, painful training. He was a relentless innovator, always thinking, always strategizing. His fellow warriors were in awe of him, his commanders took notice. And most importantly, Dingiswayo himself saw the brilliant, ruthless potential in this young Zulu exile. Shaka wasn't just a soldier, he was a natural-born leader, a military genius in the making. He experimented with new formations, drilling his regiment with a discipline that was unheard of. He introduced the famous Horns of the Buffalo formation, a tactic of encirclement that was simple in concept but devastatingly effective in practice. The chest would engage the enemy head-on, while the horns would sweep around the flanks, encircling and annihilating them completely. While serving Dingiswayo, Shaka wasn't just learning how to fight, he was learning how to lead. He understood loyalty, motivation, and the psychology of both his own men and his enemies. He built a reputation as a warrior who led from the front, a commander who shared the risks and hardships of his soldiers. This forged an unbreakable bond of loyalty. The men who served under him weren't just following orders. They were following a leader they believed in, a leader they knew could lead them to victory against any odds. He was transforming the very nature of what it meant to be a warrior. Meanwhile, back in the Zulu clan, things were changing. Shaka's father, Mfecane, grew old and died. A succession crisis followed, with Shaka's half-brother taking the chieftainship. But Shaka, now a renowned and feared commander in the Mfecane army, had the backing of the most powerful man in the region, Dingiswayo. His time in exile was nearing its end. The boy who was cast out was about to return, not as a beggar seeking acceptance, but as a conqueror ready to claim his birthright. With Dingiswayo's support and his own battle-hardened regiment, Shaka marched back towards the home that had rejected him. The takeover was swift, his half-brother was quickly dispatched, and Shaka, the illegitimate outcast, seized the chieftainship of the small, insignificant Zulu clan. He was finally home, but this was not the end of his journey. It was the true beginning. He was now the chief, but the Zulu were just one small piece in a complex puzzle of rival clans. The boy who had been tormented for his birth was now a king, and he had a vision forged in the fires of humiliation, sharpened by years of exile, and empowered by a revolutionary new way of war. He immediately began to implement the reforms he had perfected under the Mfecane. He reorganized the Zulu society along military lines, grouping young men and women into age-based regiments. The army was no longer a part-time militia. It became a professional, standing force, a tool for state-building and conquest. He instilled in his people a new sense of identity, a fierce pride in being Zulu. He took the military tactics he had pioneered and made them the standard for his entire army. The iklwa, the barefoot fighting, and the horns of the buffalo formation were now the trademarks of the Zulu military machine. The small clan was being reforged into a weapon, with Shaka as its undisputed master. His ambition was not just to lead the Zulu, but to unite all the Nguni-speaking peoples under his rule, to create an empire the likes of which the region had never seen. The stage was set for a series of events that would become known as the Mfecane, the Crushing, a period of unprecedented warfare and political consolidation that would forever change the map of southern Africa. The exiled boy had become a king, and the king was about to become a legend. Thank you for watching this chapter of our series. If you want to see how Shaka builds his mighty empire, make sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell so you don't miss the next episode. Now let us explore the forging of a new warrior.
History isn't just what happened, it's what was hidden. Welcome to the Chrono Archives, where lost empires rise again, forgotten legends speak, and ancient truths are brought back to life. From world-shaping history and powerful myths to legendary rulers and timeless civilizations, every story here is carefully uncovered, deeply researched, and cinematically told. The past is calling, will you answer? Subscribe and journey through time, one unforgettable chronicle at a time.
Welcome back to our journey through the life of one of history's most formidable figures, Shaka Zulu. Last time, we saw a young outcast, a prince without a throne, hardened by a difficult childhood. Now, we witness the forging of a warrior, the transformation of Shaka the boy into Shaka the soldier. Around 1809, a young Shaka, now in his early 20s, arrived in the domain of the powerful Mfecane paramountcy, led by the chief Dingiswayo. Like many young men his age, he was conscripted into an ibutho, a regiment of warriors. This wasn't just a band of fighters, it was the heart of the Mfecane state. But Shaka was not just any recruit. From the very beginning, something set him apart. Imagine the scene: endless plains under the vast African sky. Rows upon rows of warriors, drilling in the sun-drenched fields. The air is thick with dust, and the rhythmic chant of thousands of men. This was Shaka's new world. It was here, among the ranks of the Mfecane army, that the seeds of his military genius began to sprout. While other recruits focused on mastering the existing drills, Shaka was observing, analyzing, questioning. He saw the traditional way of fighting, a somewhat chaotic affair involving throwing spears from a distance before a disorganized clash. He saw its weaknesses. A thrown spear is a disarmed warrior. A chaotic charge lacks discipline and leaves vulnerabilities. Shaka wasn't content with the status quo. He began to innovate. He was physically imposing, known for his incredible strength and stamina. He didn't just participate in the training, he dominated it. In mock battles, his ferocity and skill were unmatched. He could outrun, outfight, and outlast anyone in his regiment. His prowess in single combat became legendary long before he ever commanded a single soldier. But it was his mind that was his most dangerous weapon. While his peers rested, Shaka was said to have walked the battlefields, studying the terrain, visualizing troop movements, and devising new tactics. Picture him at dawn, alone on a misty hilltop, the landscape below him not just land, but a chessboard. He was reimagining the very art of war. One of his first and most revolutionary ideas was to change the primary weapon. He scorned the long, light-throwing spear, the assegai. He envisioned something far more brutal and effective for close-quarters combat. He developed a new weapon, a short, broad-bladed stabbing spear with a thick, sturdy shaft. This was the iklwa, so named for the sound it supposedly made when withdrawn from an enemy's body. This wasn't a weapon to be thrown and lost, it was a weapon for decisive, face-to-face encounters. To use it required immense bravery, forcing a warrior to close the distance with his enemy. And to wield this new weapon effectively, Shaka knew he needed a new kind of shield. He redesigned the traditional Nguni shield, making it larger and heavier. It wasn't just for defense. He taught his fellow warriors how to use the shield's edge as a weapon itself to hook an opponent's shield, pull it aside, and create an opening for the deadly thrust of the iklwa. These innovations were radical, and they were initially met with skepticism. But Shaka's personal ability to demonstrate their effectiveness was undeniable. He proved it time and time again in skirmishes and smaller battles. His brilliance did not go unnoticed. Dingiswayo, the Mfecane chief, was a shrewd leader. He saw in this young, intense warrior not just a great fighter, but a great military mind. He recognized the spark of genius and began to give Shaka more responsibility. Shaka rose through the ranks with astonishing speed. From a common soldier, he was promoted to lead his own section, then his own company. He instilled in his men a level of discipline previously unheard of. He drilled them relentlessly. They marched barefoot over miles of thorny ground to toughen their feet. They learned to run in formation, to respond to hand signals instantly, to move as a single, coordinated entity. His warriors were not just soldiers, they were an extension of his will. One of Shaka's most famous tactical innovations developed during this period was the buffalo horns formation, or the impi. He would divide his army into 4 parts. The main fighting force, the chest, would engage the enemy head-on. As the enemy was pinned down, 2 horns, composed of younger, faster warriors, would encircle them from the flanks. Behind the chest was the loins, a reserve of veteran warriors who could be deployed to reinforce a weak point or deliver the final, crushing blow. It was a simple, yet devastatingly effective strategy. It was a meat grinder from which few enemies could escape. Shaka's reputation grew with every victory. Stories of his personal bravery were legendary. He didn't lead from the rear. He fought at the very front of the chest, a whirlwind of shield and iklwa. His presence inspired absolute devotion in his men and sheer terror in his enemies. He was a commander who shared every hardship with his troops. He ate what they ate, he slept where they slept, and he bled on the same battlefields. By the time he was in his late 20s, Shaka was the most celebrated commander in the Mfecane army. He had transformed a small group of warriors under his command into the most lethal fighting force in the region. He had taken the raw material of the Mfecane military system and forged it into something new, something terrifyingly efficient. But Shaka's ambition didn't end with being Dingiswayo's best general. He had proven his worth as a soldier and a commander. He had honed his skills, tested his theories, and built a following of warriors loyal to him personally. The outcast prince was now a master of war. His time in the Mfecane army was his apprenticeship, his crucible. The lessons he learned and the weapons he forged here would soon be turned to a much greater purpose, the building of his own empire. The stage was set for his return to the Zulu chiefdom. His father, Mfecane, was still on the throne, but Shaka was no longer the powerless exile. He was a warrior of renown, a commander of a disciplined and deadly force, and he had the backing of the powerful Dingiswayo. The boy who was cast out was about to return as a conqueror. Join us next time as Shaka seizes control of the Zulu clan and begins to unleash his military revolution upon all of southern Africa, changing the history of the continent forever. Thanks for watching, and if you're enjoying this deep dive into history, make sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell so you don't miss the next story. Now let us explore the birth of the impi. Imagine the vast plains of southern Africa in the early 19th century. A landscape of constant, low-level conflict between rival clans. For generations, warfare here was a ritualized dance of courage, not conquest. Warriors would stand at a distance, hurling long, thin-throwing spears called assegais. It was more about proving bravery and settling scores than annihilating an enemy. Casualties were often light, and decisive victories were rare. But in the heart of the small Mfecane paramountcy, a young, ambitious leader was about to shatter this tradition forever. His name was Shaka. Shaka had a revolutionary vision, born from his own experiences as a warrior. He saw the inherent weakness in this long-distance style of fighting. It was imprecise, wasteful, and indecisive. He asked a simple, brutal question: what if, instead of throwing your spear, you held on to it? What if you closed the distance and used it to kill? This single thought would ignite one of the most significant military revolutions in African history. The age of the impi was about to begin. Shaka's first innovation was to redesign the very weapon of Zulu warfare. He called upon the most skilled blacksmiths, not for the light, flimsy assegai, but for something new, something terrifying. Picture the scene: the rhythmic clang of hammers on hot iron, sparks flying in the dim light of the forge. Out of the fire and fury, a new weapon is born. It's shorter, with a heavy, broad blade nearly the length of a man's forearm. It wasn't designed for throwing. It was designed for thrusting, for gutting, for pure, close-quarters lethality. He named it the iklwa, after the sucking sound it made when withdrawn from a human body. This was not a tool for posturing, it was a killing machine. And with it, the nature of battle would be forever changed. But a weapon is only as good as the warrior who wields it. Shaka knew he needed to transform his soldiers as well. He introduced a new, larger shield, the isalongu. Made from tough, sun-dried cowhide, it was tall enough to protect a man from his chin to his shins. But Shaka's genius was seeing it as more than just a defensive tool. He trained his warriors to use the shield's edge as a weapon itself, to hook an opponent's shield and pull it aside, creating a fatal opening for the iklwa. It was an aggressive, offensive shield, the perfect partner to his deadly new spear. With the new weapons came a new kind of soldier. Shaka was a ruthless drill master. He forced his warriors to discard their sandals, toughening their feet to run over miles of thorny bush. He drilled them relentlessly, day after day, under the hot African sun. They practiced feints, charges, and shield wall formations until they could move as one single, disciplined entity. This was no longer a loose collection of individual warriors. This was a professional army, a true fighting force, forged in discipline and dedicated to victory. This was the impi. Shaka's final, and perhaps greatest, innovation was tactical. He devised a formation that was as elegant as it was deadly, inspired by the natural power of the bull. He called it the horns of the bull, or impondo zankamo. The formation was divided into 3 parts. The main, central force was the chest, or isofuba. This was the strongest, most experienced part of the army, tasked with meeting the enemy head-on and pinning them in place. Their job was to absorb the initial shock of battle and hold the line, a wall of shields and stabbing spears. Then came the horns, or as impondo. These were to flanking groups of younger, faster warriors. While the chest engaged the enemy, the horns would begin a sweeping run out to the sides, moving quickly to encircle the opponent. Their goal was to envelop the enemy completely, cutting off any chance of retreat. The psychological effect was devastating. Just as an enemy thought they were engaged in a frontal assault, they would suddenly find themselves attacked from the sides and the rear. Finally, there was the loins, or umuva. This was a reserve force of veteran warriors, positioned behind the chest. They were Shaka's insurance policy. The loins would sit with their backs to the battle, to prevent them from getting too excited and charging in prematurely. Shaka could deploy them to reinforce a weak spot in the chest, to finish off an already encircled enemy, or to pursue and destroy any who managed to break through the encirclement. It was a complete tactical system, designed not just to win, but to annihilate. The time had come to test this new war machine. Shaka's first major challenge came from rival clans who still practiced the old ways of fighting. Imagine the scene from their perspective. They line up for battle, expecting the usual ritual. They see the Zulus approaching, but something is different. They aren't stopping at a distance. They are advancing, silently, in a tight formation, shields interlocked. There is no war cry, just the rhythmic, terrifying stomp of thousands of bare feet on the earth. The enemy warriors ready their throwing spears. They hurl them, expecting to see Zulus fall. But the spears clatter harmlessly against the massive wall of cowhide shields, and still, the Zulus come closer. Then, With a deafening, unified roar, the Zulu chest charges. It's a collision of worlds. The old way of fighting, individual and chaotic, smashes against the new way, disciplined, brutal, and unified. Before the enemy can even react to the frontal assault, they hear shouting from their flanks. The horns are upon them, panic sets in, they are trapped. There is nowhere to run, the iklwa goes to work. The fighting is at arm's length, a bloody, terrifying whirlwind of shields and short spears. The Zulus, drilled for this very moment, are devastatingly efficient. The battle is over in minutes. Where once there would have been a few casualties and a retreat, there is now only carnage. Entire armies are wiped out. The first victories were a profound shock that sent ripples of fear across the region. Clan after clan fell before the unstoppable advance of the impi. Shaka's military revolution was not just a success. It was a cataclysm that would reshape the political and social landscape of southern Africa for decades to come. The age of the throwing spear was over. The age of the Zulu Empire, built with the shield and the iklwa, had begun. Thank you for watching. If you want to learn more about the incredible history of the Zulu Kingdom and other great military innovators, make sure to like this video and subscribe to our channel. We'll see you next time. In the heart of southern Africa, the early 19th century was a time of chaos and conflict. Small chiefdoms and clans fought endlessly over land, cattle, and water. This period, known as the Mfecane or the crushing, created a power vacuum, a desperate need for a leader who could bring order to the turmoil. And out of this crucible of violence, a new force was about to emerge. The powerful Mfecane paramountcy, which had been a stabilizing influence under its chief Dingiswayo, was suddenly thrown into disarray. Dingiswayo, Shaka's mentor and protector, was ambushed and killed by his rival, Zwide of the Ndwandwe. With Dingiswayo gone, the Mfecane were leaderless, vulnerable, and the delicate balance of power was shattered. The stage was set for a new protagonist, one who had been waiting in the wings, honing his skills, and nursing his ambitions. This was the moment Shaka had been preparing for his entire life. He wasn't the designated heir, not by a long shot. But he had something far more valuable than birthright, a brilliant military mind, an unshakable will, and the loyalty of the Mfecane was elite warriors. With Dingiswayo's death, Shaka didn't hesitate. He marched with his regiments back to the Mfecane capital, not to mourn, but to claim what he believed was his destiny. His claim was bold, even audacious. There were other potential successors, men with more legitimate ties to the throne. But Shaka had a powerful argument, his proven ability on the battlefield. He outmaneuvered his rivals, not just with military force, but with sharp political acumen. He secured the support of key commanders and influential elders who saw in him the strength needed to face the looming threat of Zwide and the Ndwandwe. Through a mix of strategic alliances, swift action, and sheer force of personality, Shaka was acclaimed as the new leader of the Mfecane. But his vision extended far beyond just leading this one group. Shaka saw that the old ways of fragmented clans and temporary alliances were no longer sustainable. Survival demanded unity. He began a revolutionary process of nation-building, starting with his own clan, the Zulu, who were at that time a small and relatively insignificant group. He merged the Zulu with the much larger Mfecane, and then set his sights on the dozens of other clans scattered across the land. This was the birth of the Zulu nation. His method was simple, but effective. Join us or face us. He offered neighboring clans a choice. They could be incorporated into his growing kingdom, retaining some autonomy, but pledging their loyalty and their warriors to him, or they could be conquered. Many chiefs, seeing the discipline and power of Shaka's army, chose to swear allegiance. They were tired of the constant warfare and saw the security that Shaka's new order could provide. For those who resisted, Shaka's response was swift and decisive. His army, reformed and re-equipped, was unlike anything the region had ever seen. He had thrown out the old ways of fighting, no more clumsy, long-throwing spears. Shaka introduced the iklwa, a short, broad-bladed stabbing spear, designed for close-quarters combat. He trained his men to fight in a tight, disciplined formation called the horns of the buffalo. The main force, the chest, would engage the enemy head-on, while two flanking horns would encircle and annihilate them. It was a terrifyingly effective tactic. He also instilled a level of discipline that was unheard of. His warriors, or impi, were a professional, standing army. They were not part-time herders called to fight. They were soldiers, living in dedicated military barracks called Mfecane. They trained relentlessly, running barefoot for miles over thorny ground to toughen their feet, practicing their formations until they moved as one single, deadly organism. This army became the very core of the new Zulu society. Everything revolved around it. A man's status was determined not by his lineage, but by his bravery and service in his regiment, his ibutho. Shaka organized the entire nation along military lines. Young boys were conscripted into cadet corps, learning the arts of war from a young age. Women, too, had their own regiments responsible for agriculture and supplying the army. This created a unified, militarized state where every single person had a role to play in service to the nation. It was a society built for total war, and it was brutally efficient. Shaka's rise was not without its costs. His methods were often ruthless. He eliminated anyone he perceived as a threat, including his own half-brothers. He demanded absolute loyalty, and the price for disobedience was death. His rule was autocratic, built on fear as much as respect. But through this iron-fisted control, he forged a single, powerful Zulu identity from a fractured collection of clans. He gave them a common purpose, a shared sense of pride, and a king to rally behind. The name Zulu, which once belonged to a minor clan, now echoed across the plains, synonymous with discipline, strength, and conquest. Imagine the scenes from this era. Shaka, adorned in the ceremonial leopard skins and crane feathers of a king, receiving the allegiance of formerly rival chiefs. Thousands upon thousands of warriors, their shields a vast, colorful mosaic, stamping their feet and striking their shields in unison, a sound like rolling thunder echoing across the grasslands. Young men leaving their homes, not as members of the Buthelezi or the Quabe clan, but as proud warriors of the Zulu Kingdom, loyal only to Shaka. He wasn't just a chief. He was the Ashaka, the great elephant, the architect of a nation. This new Zulu Kingdom was more than just a military machine. It was a social and political revolution. Shaka broke down old clan loyalties and replaced them with a national identity. He created a centralized state where power flowed directly from him. He established a system of governance and justice that was swift and absolute. Within just a few years, he had transformed a region of warring chiefdoms into the most formidable indigenous empire in southern Africa. The disparate pieces had been hammered together on the anvil of war, forged into a single, sharp spearhead pointed at the heart of the old order. The age of Shaka had truly begun, from a dispossessed outcast to the absolute ruler of a powerful new kingdom. Shaka's ascent was nothing short of meteoric. He had seized his moment, bending the chaos of the Mfecane to his will. With his nation unified and his army unmatched, Shaka now looked outward. His greatest rival, Zwide, was still at large, and the final, decisive confrontation that would determine the fate of the entire region was inevitable. The Zulu Kingdom, born in fire and disciplined by an iron will, was now ready to face its ultimate test. Thank you so much for watching. This period of history is so incredibly rich and dramatic. If you found this fascinating, please hit that like button and subscribe for more deep dives into the lives of legendary figures. Have you ever wondered how a small chiefdom can become a mighty kingdom? It's not just about winning battles, it's about what comes after. It's about turning conquered foes into loyal subjects and building something new, something stronger, together. This is the story of how a nation was forged, not just with spears, but with ideas. Imagine this. A brilliant military leader has just won a series of decisive victories. The map is expanding, but the real challenge is just beginning. How do you rule over people who were, just weeks ago, your enemies? Do you crush them, forcing them into submission? Or do you try something radically different? The choice made here would echo through history. Instead of punishment and subjugation, the strategy was one of integration. Newly conquered clans and tribes weren't treated as outsiders. They were brought into the fold, offered a place within a new, larger society. Their leaders were often allowed to retain some local authority, as long as they pledged loyalty to the central power. This wasn't just a kind gesture. It was a masterful political move. By showing respect and offering a stake in the new system, potential rebellions were turned into pillars of support. It was a process of turning them into us. But how do you take thousands of people from different backgrounds with their own loyalties and traditions and make them feel like part of a single nation? You give them a new identity. Something bigger than their old clan affiliations. This is where a stroke of genius came into play, the creation of regiments based on age, not on where you came from. These were called amabutho. Imagine you're a young man, say, 18 years old. You and every other 18-year-old from across the kingdom, whether you were from a long-time loyal clan or a newly incorporated one, were called up to join the same regiment. You would live together, train together, and work together. Your old village rivalries, they faded away. You were now brothers in arms, loyal not to a local chief, but to your king and your regiment. Your identity was reshaped. You were no longer just a Thembu or a Quabe. You were a warrior of the Zulu Kingdom, a member of the Alaba Regiment, for instance. These regiments weren't just a military force, although they were certainly a formidable one. During peacetime, which was most of the time, they were a massive, organized labor force. Think of them as a national service. One season, a regiment might be tasked with building new royal kraals or military barracks. The next, they could be sent to plant and harvest crops on the king's lands, ensuring the royal granaries were always full. They were the engine of the state's economy. This system accomplished two crucial things at once. First, it kept thousands of young, energetic men busy and productive, preventing idleness and potential unrest. Second, it built the kingdom's infrastructure and boosted its agricultural output, creating a surplus that could support a large, standing army and fuel further expansion. It was a self-reinforcing cycle of power and prosperity. And it wasn't just the men. women played an absolutely vital role in this new society. While men were away with the amabutho, women managed the homesteads, raised the children, and tended to the local crops that fed their families. They were the backbone of the domestic economy. They were also skilled artisans, weaving baskets, making pottery, and preparing hides. In some cases, women were organized into their own age-grade groups, contributing to state projects in ways that suited their roles, like carrying supplies or tending to the vast royal herds. Their labor was just as crucial as the men's in building the wealth and stability of the kingdom. The society was a well-oiled machine, with every part, male and female, working in concert. At the heart of this new economic system was something deeply ingrained in the culture: cattle. Cattle were not just a source of food, they were the ultimate measure of wealth, the currency of the kingdom. Marriages were arranged with the transfer of cattle, fines were paid in cattle, and a man's status was measured by the size of his herd. The king controlled vast, royal herds, some numbering in the tens of thousands. This was the national treasury. By strategically loaning out cattle to loyal subjects or rewarding brave warriors with them, the king could bind people to him. It was a system of patronage that ensured loyalty flowed from the bottom all the way to the top. Managing these massive herds was a complex task undertaken by the amabutho, who moved them between grazing lands and protected them from raiders. The entire economy, you could say, walked on for legs. With a unified military, a productive economy, and a shared social structure, something incredible began to happen. A new national consciousness was born. People began to take immense pride in being part of this powerful, well-organized kingdom. They shared stories of their military victories, they sang songs praising their king and their regiments, and they participated in massive national festivals that brought tens of thousands of people together. These gatherings were a spectacle of national unity, with regiments in full regalia, dancing, and singing in unison, reaffirming their allegiance and their shared identity. The symbol of the kingdom, particularly the distinctive large shield and the stabbing spear, became icons of a proud and unconquerable people. This shared pride and identity was perhaps the strongest glue holding the nation together. It was a psychological force, transforming a collection of disparate clans into a single, unified nation with a common purpose and a shared destiny. So, when we look back at the rise of this great kingdom, we see that it wasn't just about military conquest. It was a masterclass in state building. It was about the brilliant integration of conquered peoples, turning enemies into allies. It was about the revolutionary creation of age-based regiments that broke down old loyalties and forged a new, national army and workforce. It was about harnessing the labor of both men and women to build a strong, self-sufficient economy based on agriculture and the cultural importance of cattle. And finally, it was about cultivating a powerful sense of national pride and a shared identity that united everyone under a single banner. This is how you build a nation that doesn't just survive, but thrives. It's a lesson in leadership, strategy, and the power of a unifying idea. Thank you so much for watching. If you found this story of nation building as fascinating as I do, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe for more deep dives into history. Let me know in the comments what other historical leaders or kingdoms you'd like to see covered. See you in the next video. Have you ever heard of a single person's actions setting off a domino effect that reshapes an entire subcontinent? That's exactly what happened in southern Africa in the early 19th century. We're talking about a period of intense upheaval, migration, and transformation known as the Mfecane, which translates to the crushing or the scattering. And at the heart of it all was the legendary Zulu king, Shaka Now, Shaka wasn't just a warrior, he was a military genius. He revolutionized warfare in the region, introducing new tactics like the famous bull horn formation and new weapons like the short stabbing spear, the iklwa. His highly disciplined and organized Zulu army, or impi, became an unstoppable force. They didn't just defeat their enemies, they completely absorbed or displaced them. This created a ripple effect that spread across southern Africa like a shock wave. Imagine this, you're the leader of a small clan living peacefully, and suddenly, you hear that Shaka's unstoppable army is heading your way. What do? You don't stand and fight a battle you can't win. You pack up everything you own, gather your people, and you run. This is exactly what happened. Entire communities were uprooted, forced to flee their ancestral lands. These weren't small, orderly migrations, they were desperate flights for survival. As these displaced groups moved, they inevitably clashed with the people whose lands they were entering. It was a brutal chain reaction. A group fleeing the Zulu would push into another group's territory, who would then be forced to move and push into another's, and so on. This wave of conflict and displacement spread for hundreds, even thousands of kilometers. From the plains of the Highveld to the mountains of modern-day Lesotho and the lands beyond the Limpopo River, no one was left untouched. Let's trace some of these incredible journeys. One of the most famous groups to emerge from this chaos was the Ndebele, led by one of Shaka's own formidable commanders, Mfecane. After a falling out with Shaka, Mfecane took his followers and carved out a path of conquest northwards. They were a military force in their own right, adopting many of the Zulu tactics. They traveled across the Highveld, eventually crossing the Limpopo River and establishing a powerful Zulu Kingdom in what is now Zimbabwe. Their journey was one of constant warfare, but also one of nation-building on the move. Then there was Mfecane, another of Shaka's contemporaries. He led his people, the Gaza, north into what is now Mozambique. There, he established the Gaza Empire, a vast and powerful state that dominated the region for decades. He conquered and assimilated local Tsonga and Shona peoples, creating a new, blended society under his rule. His story shows how the Mfecane wasn't just about fleeing. It was also about creating new political entities in new lands. Meanwhile, in the rugged, mountainous terrain of present-day Lesotho, another remarkable leader rose to prominence, Mfecane. Unlike the others who built their power through conquest on the plains, Mfecane was a master diplomat and defensive strategist. He gathered scattered Sotho-speaking refugees and clans, people fleeing from the chaos below. He led them to a defensible mountain stronghold, Thababosu, the Mountain of Night. From this natural fortress, he withstood sieges from all comers. Whether they were other African groups or later, the European Boers, Mfecane built the Basotho nation not through aggressive expansion, but by offering protection and forging a new collective identity from the shattered remnants of old clans. The effects of the Mfecane were profound and long-lasting. It completely redrew the political and demographic map of southern Africa. Old chiefdoms were obliterated, and new, larger, more centralized states emerged in their place. Think of the Zulu Kingdom itself, the Ndebele Kingdom, the Gaza Empire, and the Basotho Nation. These powerful entities were all born from the crucible of the Mfecane. The era also saw the rise of formidable warrior queens like Mfecane, who led Hertlakwa people on a sweeping campaign of their own after being displaced. But it's crucial to understand that the Mfecane wasn't just a story of destruction. It was a period of immense social and political innovation. In the face of existential threats, people reorganized themselves. New identities were forged. People who might have identified with a small clan just a generation earlier now saw themselves as part of a larger nation as Zulu, Ndebele, or Basotho. This period forced a shift from small-scale societies to larger, more complex political structures, often based on military strength and loyalty to a powerful king. Historians today debate the exact causes and scale of the Mfecane. Some argue that focusing solely on Shaka is too simplistic, pointing to other factors like drought, famine, and competition over trade routes with European colonists at the coast. These pressures were likely already causing instability, and Shaka's rise was the spark that ignited a powder keg that was already there. The truth is probably a complex mix of all these factors. What is undeniable is the sheer scale of the transformation. It was a brutal, violent, and chaotic period that caused immense suffering for countless people. But out of that chaos, new nations were forged, new leaders emerged, and the entire social and political landscape of Southern Africa was reshaped forever. The legacy of the Mfecane can still be seen today in the ethnic and political geography of the region. It's a powerful reminder of how periods of great upheaval, as devastating as they are, can also be periods of profound and lasting change. Thanks for watching. If you found this history as fascinating as I do, be sure to like this video, subscribe to our channel, and hit that notification bell so you don't miss our next exploration into the pivotal moments that shaped our world. See you next time. In the heart of the mighty Zulu Kingdom, a shadow was about to fall, a darkness born not from an invading army, but from the deepest chambers of a single man's heart. This is the story of Shaka Zulu, not as the unyielding warrior king, but as a son plunged into an abyss of grief, a grief so profound it threatened to tear his entire nation apart. She was his anchor, his confidant, the one person whose influence could temper his volcanic rage and guide his ambition. Nandi wasn't just the queen mother, she was the emotional bedrock of Shaka's world. Her life had been one of hardship and exile, and Shaka had spent his reign ensuring she was revered and protected, a symbol of his own triumph over adversity. Then, the unthinkable happened. Nandi died. For Shaka, this was not merely a loss, it was an annihilation of his inner world. The man who could stare down armies and command the loyalty of thousands was brought to his knees by a force he could not conquer: sorrow. As the news spread, a wave of shock and fear rippled through the kingdom. Shaka emerged from his mourning hut, his eyes wild with a pain that bordered on madness. He looked upon his people, and in his shattered mind, he saw not shared sorrow, but insufficient grief. He believed their mourning did not match the magnitude of his own loss, and this perceived betrayal ignited a terrifying rage. He declared a period of national mourning, an alambo, but this was to be no ordinary tribute. It was a descent into collective hysteria, dictated by the king's own fractured psyche. Shaka proclaimed a series of laws, each more extreme than the last. For an entire year, no crops were to be planted. No milk, the staple of the Zulu diet, was to be consumed. It was to be drawn from the cows and poured onto the ground. Any man and woman found to be cohabiting would be executed. The executions were frequent and arbitrary. Anyone deemed not to be grieving with sufficient intensity could be accused and summarily killed. It's estimated that thousands of Zulus were executed during this dark period, a brutal chapter often called the Shaka's Madness. The very foundations of the Zulu state, built on order and discipline, began to crumble. The regimental system, Shaka's masterpiece of social and military engineering, was strained to its breaking point. Senior generals and chiefs, men who had fought alongside Shaka for years, watched in horror. They saw their king, the architect of their glory, becoming the agent of their destruction. His grief was not just a personal matter, it had become a national security crisis. The nation was starving. The people lived in terror, and the king was unreachable, lost in his own desolate world. While Shaka was isolated in his grief, his half-brothers, Dingaan and Mfecane, saw an opportunity. They had long harbored their own ambitions and resented Shaka's absolute rule. Now, they saw a king who was not only emotionally vulnerable, but was also rapidly losing the support of his key commanders and the loyalty of his people. The instability Shaka himself had created became the very soil in which the seeds of conspiracy could grow. They began to plot, finding sympathetic ears among those who believed the king had to be stopped for the good of the Zulu nation itself. The paradox is heartbreaking. Shaka, in an attempt to honor the memory of the woman who gave him life, set in motion the events that would lead directly to the end of his own. His uncontrolled grief, his inability to separate his personal loss from his public duty, became his fatal flaw. It was a tragic testament to the fact that even the most powerful leaders are, in the end, human. Their emotions, their loves, and their losses can shape the destiny of empires. This period of madness following Nandi's death is a crucial, often overlooked, part of Shaka's story. It adds a layer of tragic complexity to the figure of the warrior king. It shows us that the line between a powerful ruler and a destructive tyrant can be terrifyingly thin, and sometimes all it takes to cross it is a broken heart. The empire Shaka built would outlive him, but it would be forever marked by this dark time, a chilling reminder of when a son's love, twisted by grief, nearly unmade a kingdom. Thank you for watching. If you found this story compelling, please like this video, subscribe to our channel, and hit the notification bell for more deep dives into history's most fascinating figures. The year is 1828. A storm is brewing over the Zulu Kingdom, a mighty empire forged by the will of one man, Shaka Zulu. But the very power that built this nation is about to become its undoing. This isn't just a story about the end of a king's reign. It's the story of how empires, no matter how grand, can be shattered from within. Shaka, the name itself echoed with the power of 1,000 spears. From a disowned prince, he had risen to become the most feared and respected leader in southern Africa. His military genius, the horns of the buffalo formation, was legendary. He had united dozens of clans into a single, formidable force, changing the very map of the region. But the path to greatness is often paved with blood, and Shaka's was no exception. His rule was absolute, his discipline iron-fisted. Those who defied him, or even disappointed him, faced a swift and brutal end. This culture of fear, once a tool of control, had begun to breed resentment in the shadows. The breaking point came with the death of Shaka's beloved mother, Nandi. Grief consumed him, twisting into a dark and unpredictable rage. He declared a period of national mourning, so extreme it bordered on madness. No crops were to be planted, no milk could be drunk. Anyone found to be insufficiently grieving, even a pregnant woman, was executed. The kingdom, already strained by years of constant warfare, began to buckle under the weight of its king's sorrow. The people were starving, the warriors were weary, and the whispers of dissent grew louder. In the dead of night, while rain lashed against the huts, two figures met in secret. They were Dingaan and Mfecane, Shaka's own half-brothers. They had watched Shaka's descent with a mixture of fear and ambition. They saw a kingdom on the brink of collapse and an opportunity for themselves. They weren't alone. They were joined by Mbopa, an Induna, a high-ranking servant who had been a trusted member of Shaka's inner circle. For him, this was a betrayal born of self-preservation, a desperate gamble to escape the king's increasingly erratic and dangerous whims. Together, they forged a pact, a conspiracy sealed by the shared belief that Shaka had to be removed for the Zulu nation to survive. The day of the deed was September 22, 1828. The scene was Dukuza, Shaka's royal kraal, near what is now the town of Stanger in KwaZulu-Natal. The king was receiving a delegation of Pondo emissaries. It was a routine moment of courtly life, a scene that had played out countless times. Shaka, confident and unguarded, sat among his people. His main army was away on a campaign, a calculated move by the conspirators. The heart of the empire was left vulnerable. Suddenly, the conspirators made their move. They burst into the clearing. Shaka, surprised but still a warrior, rose to face them. He reportedly looked at his brothers, a mix of shock and recognition in his eyes. He tried to speak, perhaps to reason, perhaps to curse them. But there was no time for words. Mbopa, his trusted servant, struck the first blow. Then came the spears of his brothers, Dingaan and Mfecane. The blades found their mark again and again. The great king, the man who had commanded armies and built an empire, fell to the dusty ground. His last words, according to legend, were not a plea for his life, but a chilling prophecy. "Are you stabbing me, kings of the earth?" he supposedly asked. "You will not rule. The swallows will." He was referring to the white settlers, the Europeans, whose presence was growing on the fringes of his kingdom. He saw that his death, this act of fratricide, would not bring them power, but would instead weaken the Zulu nation, leaving it vulnerable to outside forces. In the immediate aftermath, chaos reigned. Shaka's body was hastily buried in an empty grain pit, a dishonorable end for a king of his stature. The news of his assassination sent shockwaves through the kingdom. The great Zulu Empire, a testament to one man's vision and will, began to fracture. Without its unyielding center, the unity Shaka had fought so hard to create began to unravel. Dingaan, after a power struggle that saw him eliminate his co-conspirator Mfecane, seized the throne. But he could never command the same loyalty or fear as Shaka. He inherited a divided kingdom, and a legacy he could not live up to. The civil wars and internal conflicts that followed the assassination weakened the Zulu military and political structure, just as Shaka had predicted. The empire that had once been an unstoppable force was now fighting for its own survival. Shaka's legacy, however, is far more complex than just his brutal end. He was a nation builder, a military innovator, and a figure of immense historical importance. He created a Zulu identity that endures to this day. The tactics he perfected are still studied in military academies around the world. But his story is also a cautionary tale about the nature of power. It shows how a leader's strengths, when taken to extremes, can become their greatest weaknesses. His ambition built an empire, but his paranoia and ruthlessness tore it apart from the inside. The fall of Shaka Zulu wasn't just the death of a man. It was a turning point in the history of Southern Africa. The internal division created by his assassination left the Zulu Kingdom vulnerable, ultimately paving the way for the conflicts with the Voortrekkers and the British, culminating in the Anglo-Zulu War decades later. The prophecy of the swallows had, in a way, come true. So, when we look back at the life of Shaka, we see a story of incredible ambition, brilliant strategy, and ultimately, tragic self-destruction. The spear that struck him down was held by his brothers, but it was forged in the fires of his own tyrannical rule. It serves as a timeless reminder that no empire is invincible, and that the greatest threats often come not from external enemies, but from the betrayals brewing within. Thank you so much for watching. If you found this story as fascinating as I do, please hit the like button and subscribe for more deep dives into the most dramatic moments in history. Let us know in the comments what historical event you'd like to see us cover next. See you in the next video. Shaka Zulu, a name that echoes through history, synonymous with both nation-building and brutal conquest. But who was the man behind the legend? And how does his legacy continue to shape the world today, to centuries after his death? Let's explore the complex and controversial story of the founder of the Zulu Kingdom. Before Shaka, the Zulu were just one of many small Nguni-speaking chiefdoms in what is now southeastern South Africa. They lived a pastoral life, and warfare, when it happened, was often ritualistic with limited casualties. Shaka's rise to power in the early 19th century changed everything. He didn't just inherit a chiefdom, he forged an empire. His story begins with a difficult childhood. Born an illegitimate son, he and his mother were exiled, facing hardship and ridicule. This early struggle is said to have fueled his immense ambition and hardened his resolve. He found refuge with the Mfecane paramountcy under the chief Dingiswayo, where he distinguished himself as a brilliant and ferocious warrior. It was here that he began to hone the military ideas that would revolutionize warfare in the region. When Dingiswayo died, Shaka seized his opportunity. Through a combination of strategic brilliance and sheer ruthlessness, he consolidated power and began to build his own kingdom. His vision was clear: to unite the scattered Nguni clans under a single, powerful Zulu identity. At the heart of Shaka's success were his revolutionary military reforms. He discarded the traditional long-throwing spear, the assegai, and replaced it with a short, broad-bladed stabbing spear called the iklwa. The name is said to come from the sound it made as it was withdrawn from an enemy's body. This weapon forced his warriors into close-quarters combat, a terrifying and decisive tactic. But the weapon was only part of the strategy. Shaka developed the famous bull horn formation, or impi. This tactic involved a central chest that would pin the enemy, while Tahorns on the flanks would encircle and annihilate them. A reserve force, the loins, would be held back, ready to be deployed where needed or to pursue fleeing enemies. It was a sophisticated and brutally effective system. He also transformed the very nature of being a warrior. He introduced rigorous, non-stop training, forcing his soldiers to run barefoot over miles of thorny ground to toughen their feet. He organized his army into age-based regiments, or emabutho, which fostered intense loyalty, discipline, and a powerful sense of camaraderie. These were not part-time herders, they were a professional, standing army, loyal only to him. With this military machine, Shaka embarked on a massive campaign of conquest and consolidation. From a small tribe of a few thousand, the Zulu Kingdom swelled to control a vast territory, home to 250,000 people and fielding an army of 50,000 warriors. Those who submitted were incorporated into the growing Zulu nation, their men joining his regiments. Those who resisted were crushed. This period of intense warfare and mass migration is known as the Mfecane, or the crushing. It was a time of immense upheaval across southern Africa. As Shaka expanded his empire, he displaced countless tribes, sending waves of refugees fleeing across the subcontinent. This domino effect led to widespread conflict, famine, and the depopulation of vast areas. It also led to the formation of new states and kingdoms by those fleeing the Zulu advance, like the Sotho under Mashoshu and the Ndebele under Mzilikazi, one of Shaka's own generals who broke away. This is where the debate over Shaka's legacy truly ignites. Was he a visionary leader, a genius who forged a powerful and proud nation from disparate clans, instilling a cultural identity that endures to this day? Or was he a ruthless warlord, a tyrant whose ambition left a trail of destruction and death, responsible for the suffering of countless people during the Mfecane? The truth, as it often is complex and lies somewhere in between. To his people, he was the Ashaka, the great elephant, the founder of their nation. He created a sense of unity and pride that was previously unknown. He established a powerful kingdom that would later famously defy the British Empire, a testament to the military and social structures he had put in place. The Battle of Isandlwana in 1879, decades after Shaka's death, saw the Zulu army inflict one of the most humiliating defeats ever on the technologically superior British, using the very tactics Shaka had pioneered. However, his rule was undeniably brutal. He demanded absolute obedience, and dissent was punishable by death. Accounts from the time speak of mass executions and a reign of terror, particularly after the death of his mother, Nandi. In his grief, he is said to have ordered a period of enforced mourning, so severe that thousands perished. Crops could not be planted, milk could not be consumed, and any woman who became pregnant was executed along with her husband. This tyranny eventually led to his downfall. In 1828, Shaka was assassinated by his own half-brothers, Dingaan and Mfecane, who feared his increasingly erratic and brutal behavior. Dingaan then took the throne, but he inherited a kingdom forged in Shaka's image. So what is Shaka Zulu's legacy today? It is everywhere in South Africa. He is celebrated as a symbol of black pride and resistance. His name is invoked by politicians and artists. The main airport in Durban is named King Shaka International Airport. His military strategies are still studied in war colleges around the world, from West Point to Sandhurst. At the same time, the legacy of the Mfecane and the violent methods he used cannot be ignored. The historical and ethnic landscape of southern Africa was irrevocably altered by his actions, setting the stage for conflicts that would last for generations. Shaka Zulu was a figure of immense contradictions. A nation builder and a destroyer, a brilliant strategist and a merciless tyrant. His story is not just a chapter in African history. It's a timeless lesson in power, ambition, and the complex, often bloody, process of forging a nation. He remains one of history's most compelling and controversial figures, a man whose shadow looms large over the mountains and valleys of Zululand and far, far beyond. Thanks for watching. If you found this journey into the life of Shaka Zulu interesting, please hit that like button and subscribe for more deep dives into the figures who shaped our world. See you next time.
As we close this chapter of the Chrono Archives, remember, the past is never truly gone. It waits patiently in the shadows of forgotten ruins, in the echoes of ancient voices, and in the timeless lessons that still guide us today. It waits to be remembered by curious minds like yours. Thank you for joining us on this extraordinary journey through the annals of time. If today's exploration of lost civilizations, mythical legends, or historical enigmas ignited your passion for the past, hit that like button, drop a comment with your favorite moment or what you'd love to see next, and most importantly, subscribe to the Chrono Archives and continue the journey through time. Turn on notifications so you never miss an episode where we unearth buried secrets, decode ancient mysteries, and bring history's greatest stories back to life. Together, we'll keep the flame of the past burning bright. Until next time, fellow time travelers, keep questioning, keep discovering, and keep remembering. The Chrono Archives, where the past lives forever.